It was a typical Saturday afternoon, nothing out of the ordinary, until my son pulled me aside and whispered something that completely stopped me in my tracks. "Don't let anyone know what we just did," he said, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the urgency in his voice told me it was serious. I tried to keep calm, but inside, I was already starting to panic. What had we done? Why did it matter so much that no one could find out? Was it something innocent, or had we crossed a line that couldn't be undone? The look on his face was enough to make me rethink everything. You see, my son has always been the kind of kid who does things by the book, smart, responsible, and careful. So to hear him say something like that was unsettling. The last time he had asked me to keep something secret, it was about a surprise gift for his mom. But this felt different. This wasn't just a secret, it was something bigger. As he took a deep breath, I could tell he was weighing whether or not to tell me the whole story. I needed to know what had happened, but I had to respect his boundaries too. All I could do was wait, hoping he'd be ready to open up. What was it that made him so desperate to keep this between us? Stay tuned as I dive into what happened that day and how everything quickly spiraled into something neither of us expected. The truth, as it turns out, was more than just a secret. It was a revelation. As we stood there in the hallway, the tension was almost palpable. My son, Noah, kept glancing over his shoulder, as though he expected someone to come barging through the door at any second. His usual confident demeanor was replaced by a kind of nervous energy I hadn't seen before. I tried to play it cool, but I couldn't stop myself from asking, "What exactly happened, Noah?" He hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his sweatshirt. I I don't know how to explain it," he murmured. It just, it's a lot." My heart started to race. What could be so serious? Noah had always been open with me, whether it was about school, friends, or even the things he struggled with. This sudden silence felt like a wall between us, and I wasn't sure how to break it down. I knelt down to his level and looked him in the eye, trying to reassure him. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" I said softly. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." Noah swallowed hard and finally nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the ground. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I didn't mean for it to happen. It wasn't supposed to go this far." The words didn't make sense to me. What wasn't supposed to go this far, I asked, now more confused than ever. That's when he told me about the phone call. Apparently, a group of kids at school had been planning something that Noah hadn't thought twice about joining at first. They made it sound harmless, just a bit of fun at the expense of someone who had been making trouble in their class. But as it went on, things got out of hand. He had been swept up in the moment, and before he knew it, was involved in something much bigger. Now, he didn't know what to do. The group wanted to take it even further. And Noah, feeling guilty, couldn't walk away. He wasn't sure if he could even talk to anyone about it without making things worse. The weight of the secret was crushing him, and it was clear he was torn between doing the right thing and protecting himself from the fallout. "I don't want anyone to get hurt," he added, his voice barely audible. "But I don't know how to stop it now." My stomach dropped as I realized how deep he was into something he couldn't control, and that's when it hit me. I needed to find out what they had planned, and fast, because whatever it wasn't just a schoolyard prank anymore. It was something far more dangerous, and I had to figure out how to keep my son from becoming part of a mess that could destroy everything. But Noah wasn't ready to share more just yet, and that terrified me even more. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Noah's troubled face kept flashing in my mind. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, but part of me didn't want to push him too hard. He was clearly scared, and if I pushed too much, I feared I might lose whatever trust we had left. But at the same time, the silence between us was suffocating. What was so bad that he couldn't tell me? Why did it feel like he was carrying the weight of something far beyond his years? The next morning, I tried to keep things normal, but it was impossible. Noah was distant, distracted. His usual enthusiasm was gone, replaced by a sense of urgency I couldn't place. I noticed he kept checking his phone, as if he was waiting for something. Maybe it was one of the kids from his group, maybe not. But the feeling that something was about to happen lingered in the air, thick and heavy. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called a few of the parents whose kids Noah had mentioned in passing before. I tried to sound casual, like I was just checking in, but I could tell they were all as vague as possible. It was as if they knew something was wrong, but were too afraid to talk about it openly. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that whatever Noah had gotten involved in, it wasn't just affecting him, it was affecting everyone around him. By the time the school day ended, my anxiety had reached a boiling point. I picked him up, my mind racing with questions. He was quieter than usual, barely meeting my eyes. "Noah, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm but gentle. He flinched, looking around as if someone might be watching us. It was a strange reaction, one that only deepened my growing suspicion. "What's going on, buddy?" I asked, my voice lowering. He hesitated before finally saying, I can't tell you yet. I need more time." The way he said it, his voice cracking at the end, made my heart sink. It was as though he was holding on to something, a secret so big it was eating away at him. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't just a case of a group of kids acting out. There was something much darker at play, something he was too afraid to fully acknowledge. Later that evening, I did what any parent would do in a moment like this. I called his best friend Alex. If anyone knew what was going on, it would be him. But when I mentioned Noah's name, Alex's tone instantly shifted. I can't really talk about it," he said, his voice shaky. It wasn't just a simple secret anymore. It was a web of lies, fear, and tension, and I had no idea how far it stretched. All I knew was that time was running out. Something had to give, and soon. That night, the tension between Noah and me was unbearable. He had barely said a word to me since I picked him up from school, and the silence was like a weight pressing down on both of us. I could feel him pulling further away, like he was trapped in some invisible cage, and no matter what I did, he couldn't, or wouldn't, escape. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let him keep carrying this on his own. I had to find out what was going on before it was too late. Around midnight, after a long stretch of pacing and trying to calm myself down, I heard a faint knock on Noah's bedroom door. I hesitated, wondering if it was him, maybe coming to talk. But when I opened it, there was only a shadow of someone standing there, their form outlined by the light from the hallway. Noah's friend Alex was standing in the doorway, his face as pale as a ghost. "What are you doing here?" I asked, startled. I hadn't expected him to show up at this hour. He stepped inside, glancing nervously behind him, as if he was afraid someone might be following him. Alex started, his voice shaky. "I can't stay quiet about this anymore. Your son, he's in real trouble." I motioned for him to sit down, my mind racing. "What are you talking about, Alex? What trouble?" He hesitated before looking at me with wide eyes. "It's not just a prank. They've been planning something all along. It started out small, but now it's bigger. Noah's in the middle of it, and I don't think he can get out." My stomach churned as he spoke, his words confirming all the fears I'd had but never wanted to admit. "Who's they?" I pressed, my voice rising in urgency. "It's a group, a bunch of kids from school, some older ones, some younger. They've been doing things, dangerous things, and now they're making Noah part of it. He didn't ask for this, but he's stuck, and they won't let him leave." Alex paused, looking at me with a mixture of fear and guilt. "I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I think it's happening tomorrow. It's already set." I felt a chill run through me. Tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to stop whatever this was before it spiraled completely out of control. My mind was racing. How had this all escalated so quickly? And what was so bad that Noah couldn't even bring himself to tell me the full truth? Alex was visibly shaken, his hands trembling. You need to stop it before it goes any further. I don't know if it's too late, but you have to try, please. The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had no idea what kind of mess I was about to walk into, but one thing was clear. This was bigger than I ever could have imagined, and I had to find a way to stop it. Whatever it was. I sat frozen, staring at Alex as his words hung in the air. I could hardly breathe. Tomorrow. It was happening tomorrow. Whatever it was, whatever Noah had gotten tangled up in, it was all coming to a head in just a few hours. My mind raced, my thoughts spiraling. I had to stop it. I had to find a way to pull Noah out of this mess before it consumed him. But something wasn't adding up. Alex's face was pale and his hands were shaking. Guilt, fear, maybe even panic. Why was he so afraid? Why didn't he know more? And why was he telling me this now, at the last minute? It felt like there was something he wasn't telling me, something that could change everything. Alex, what exactly are they planning? I asked, my voice sharp now. What's going to happen tomorrow? He shifted uneasily, glancing nervously toward the door. I don't know all the details, but I know enough. Enough to know it's bad. They've been talking about something huge, something big. And he's the one they're relying on. What do you mean, relying on? I felt the pit in my stomach grow deeper with each passing second. I don't know, he said, his voice cracking. But I know it's serious. Whatever it is, they've got everyone involved. People Noah doesn't even know. Older kids, some with bad histories. They're all in on it. My heart pounded in my chest. I had always thought I could protect my son. But now? Now I was beginning to realize just how little I actually knew. Is Noah in danger? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Alex hesitated before answering, looking at the floor like he was trying to piece together the words. I don't think it's just about him. I think they want something bigger. And Noah, he's the key. I was about to ask more when suddenly my phone buzzed. It was a message from Noah's phone. I opened it quickly, my pulse racing, but what I saw stopped me cold. It was a cryptic text that simply read, "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't get out." My heart dropped. What the hell was that supposed to mean? It was clear now. Noah was in deeper than I had ever imagined, and he didn't think he could get out. Alex, I need you to tell me everything you know, I said urgently, trying to hold on to the last thread of control. You have to help me understand what's happening. Alex looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know how much longer I can stay in this. I wasn't supposed to be part of it. But Noah, he's not the only one who's in trouble. They're after more than just him. It's bigger, way bigger than any of us. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a schoolyard game gone wrong. This was a carefully orchestrated plan, something far more dangerous than I had imagined. The group Noah had gotten mixed up with wasn't just looking for fun or revenge. It was bigger than that. It was organized, and the people behind it were connected to forces I couldn't even begin to understand. Alex continued, his voice shaking. They're using Noah as leverage. They're making him believe he has no way out. And I think they want him to do something. Something he won't be able to take back. I froze, the weight of his words settling over me. What do you mean, something he can't take back? Alex's eyes darted nervously to the door again, as if afraid someone was listening. I don't know the details, but I overheard them talking. They need him for something, a job, a task. If he doesn't do it, they'll go after us. After me. I felt the ground beneath me shift. This wasn't just about Noah anymore. This was about everything we'd ever known, his friendships, our family. The stakes were higher than I had imagined. They weren't just manipulating him. They were controlling him, pulling strings that went far beyond his understanding. And now, with every minute that passed, I felt time slipping away. My mind raced. I couldn't let Noah go through with this. I couldn't let him become a pawn in whatever twisted game this was. But how could I stop it? How could I find the strength to tear him out of this nightmare before it was too late? And then, just as I began to form a plan in my head, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a new message, this one from an unknown number. The message read, "We know you're looking into us. Stay out of it, or it will be your last mistake." The message on my phone sent a chill down my spine. "We know you're looking into us. Stay out of it, or it will be your last mistake." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. I knew this wasn't just an empty threat. Whoever these people were, they were dangerous, and they were watching me now, watching us. But I couldn't back down. I had to save Noah. He had no idea what he was caught up in, and time was running out. I turned to Alex, desperation creeping into my voice. "We need to find him now. Do you know where they're meeting?" Alex swallowed hard, shaking his head. I don't know. But I heard something. They've been planning something at the old warehouse by the docks. That's where they've been meeting." I grabbed my keys, my heart racing. "Come on, we're going now." We drove in tense silence, the weight of what we were walking into heavy on my shoulders. The streets passed by in a blur, and every minute felt like an eternity. I kept thinking about Noah. Was he scared? Was he trapped, like Alex said? My mind couldn't stop spinning. I needed to get to him, to pull him out before whatever twisted plan they had in motion became reality. When we arrived at the warehouse, I could see a few cars parked outside, but the place was dark and eerily quiet. I didn't see any signs of movement. I could barely make out the shape of the building through the fog, its windows shattered and boarded up, like something from a forgotten world. I motioned for Alex to stay close. "We have to be careful," I whispered, the fear settling into my chest like lead. We crept inside, the silence almost suffocating. The air smelled of decay, and the floor creaked beneath our feet. I could hear muffled voices in the distance, and my heart skipped a beat. We were getting close. Suddenly, we rounded a corner, and there he was, Noah. But he wasn't alone. My stomach dropped as I saw the faces around him, kids I didn't recognize, but their eyes. They were cold, calculating. And there, in the center of the group, was a figure I never expected to see. Noah's older brother, Jake. He had been out of town for the last few months, and I hadn't heard from him in ages. He stood there, his arms crossed, a smug look on his face. I couldn't believe it. Jake was the one behind all of this. "Noah, get away from them," I shouted, my voice filled with panic and disbelief. Noah's eyes flicked toward me, but there was no recognition, no relief. He looked different, almost like he was in a trance. "I'm sorry, Dad," he muttered, his voice flat. "I can't leave." I took a step forward, shaking my head. "What's going on, Jake? Why are you doing this?" Jake smirked, his expression dark. "It's not about what I'm doing. It's about what Noah's about to do. He's the key, Dad. You just didn't see it." The pieces began to fall into place. Jake had orchestrated this whole thing, manipulating Noah into believing he had no other option. But there was more. Jake wasn't just working with these kids. He was involved with something much bigger. This wasn't just about a few pranks or petty schemes. It was about control, about power. And then, before I could say another word, Noah stepped forward, his face completely empty of emotion. "It's too late, Dad," he said, his voice almost mechanical. "They won't let us leave." Suddenly the ground beneath me shifted. A faint sound echoed in the distance, growing louder. A truck, headlights cutting through the fog. My heart raced. Whoever Jake was working with wasn't just a group of high school kids. They were connected to something far darker. But before I could process what was happening, the sound of a door creaking open shattered the tension. A man in a dark coat stepped into the warehouse, his eyes locked onto me. He didn't say a word, but there was something unmistakable in his gaze. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The man who stepped into the warehouse was tall, his face shadowed by the brim of a wide hat. His presence sent a shiver down my spine. I had no idea who he was, but the way he moved, the way he looked at us, It felt like we were caught in something we couldn't escape. And as his eyes locked onto mine, I realized this was the person Jake had been working with all along. "Noah," I said, my voice cracking, "please, listen to me. This isn't you. This isn't the way out. Come back with me. You're not trapped." For a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it was fleeting. He shook his head slowly, almost like he was fighting something deep inside. "I have to do this, Dad. They won't let us go." Jake stepped forward, his expression cold. "It's too late now. He's already made his choice." I could feel the weight of those words hanging over me. My son, my only son, was caught in the middle of something I couldn't even comprehend. And I knew I had to do everything in my power to pull him back, to remind him who he really was. I took a deep breath and approached him, keeping my voice steady. "Noah, you don't owe anyone anything. Not like this. You're not just a pawn in their game. You have the strength to walk away. Please, come home." There was a long pause. The air felt thick, like everything was about to explode. But then something shifted. The tension in Noah's face loosened. I saw the conflict within him. He was fighting it, trying to break free. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered, his voice full of regret. "I didn't know how to get out. I thought this was the only way." The man in the coat stepped forward, his hand resting on Jake's shoulder. "It's not that simple," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't understand the bigger picture." But just then, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. I didn't know how they had found us, but the police were here. Jake's smirk faltered. The man's expression turned dark, and without another word, they turned to flee. In that moment, everything seemed to freeze. Noah looked at me, his eyes full of fear and relief, as though he finally realized he could escape. "Let's go," I said, pulling him toward me. We ran out of the warehouse just as the police arrived. Officers swarmed in, but by then Jake and the man had vanished into the night. Noah and I were safe, but I knew this wasn't the end. It wasn't over. There were still pieces of this puzzle left unsolved. As I drove home with Noah that night, I couldn't help but reflect on how easily things could have gone wrong. It was a wake-up call, a reminder of how quickly life could spiral out of control. But I also realized something important. No matter how dark things get, there's always a way back, a way to fight for what matters most. Family. Noah looked at me, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thanks, Dad," he said softly. "I don't know how I ended up here, but I'm glad you didn't give up on me." And as we drove into the night, I knew we were heading toward a new chapter, one where I would always be there to guide him, no matter what. The road ahead might not be easy, but together we could face whatever came next.